Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title and topic, Bending the Knee for Trump, a pathetic display of human invertebrates. Trump's inaugural is about a week away, and since the election, there's been a rush to Trump's front door of all sorts of personnel to try to seek and gain favor of Donald Trump. Let's go to the Senate. You know, the Senate right now, the Republican Senate is supposed to advise and consent. And some of these candidates are, well, they're woefully unqualified, and they're horribly flawed, or they're both. And right now we're seeing that as pertains to Pete Hegseth. And recently we're seeing Joni Ernst, who said that she was not going to really favor his selection. Now she has. She's stated it in the media. Then let's go to our billionaire club. We have Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, all throwing elbows to get in line to please Donald Trump. And we'll go through the specifics of what they've been up to since Election Day. So these are just a couple examples of how people are capitulating that you wouldn't think would capitulate, particularly news media outlets like the Washington Post and the LA Times, but there they are. So to talk about these details and these stories, I have with me my esteemed guest, Chuck Crumpton, and my other special esteemed guest, Ben Davis. And of course, always, my co-host, Jay Fidell. Okay, let's get to it. Jay, to you. Give us some examples of where you've seen overt bending of the knee. We could call it kowtowing if you wish, that you would not have expected to see certain individuals or organizations bend the knee. And specifically, if you wouldn't mind addressing the Billionaire Club, what they have been doing to please Donald Trump, and are we on the way to an oligarchy, or are we there now?
If you want, a list of the people who've been bending a knee, take a look at the seating chart for the inauguration. It's like it's all tech. And a few years ago, the tech guys were Democrats, and they were opposed to Trump, but somehow he got them on board. So, of course, you have Musk, you have Bezos, you have Zuck, you have Sundar Pichai, you have Peter Thiel, and I don't know, there are others too in the Billionaire Club. They're going to be sitting in the front row at the inauguration. Easy to see who's bending a knee. That rhymes. And what it tells us is that these guys not only are going to have access, but they're going to have policy access. And he's going to have a government of oligopoly. It's like Ben Franklin walked out the door of Liberty Hall and a woman stopped him. You've all heard this story. A woman stopped him and she said, Dr. Franklin, what kind of a government are we going to have? And Ben Franklin said, well, we're going to have a republic, madam, if you can keep it. But what they don't quote is, and if you can't keep it, we're going to have a plutocracy governed by wealth, those who are wealthy. And there's plenty of history from the classical days to modern times where the rich are the ones who have the ear of the dictator. And so I think that's where it's going. And not only is it going there, to answer your question, Tim, but it's gone there. These guys who are being, confirmed, a lot of them will be confirmed, are pass-throughs. They're transparent. Trump will get around them or just give them orders. They will not exercise independent judgment, and their agencies will just not exercise independent judgment. He's going to get rid of anybody in the the bureaucracy that isn't loyal. It's all going to be a question of loyalty. So, what is actually a plutocracy? What is an oligopoly? And I think we're seeing it happen now. We're seeing it happen in these guys he sends to Europe, like Musk, to actually do diplomacy, even though they're not authorized to do that, and it's a violation of the Logan Act. And we're seeing him come up with all these things and authorize all these, these plutocrats, if you will, to step in. So it's interesting how a lot of these nominees are going to be irrelevant. Trump micromanaged his business. He's going to micromanage the government. These confirmations, in large part, are irrelevant. It's the oligarchs who are going to have access and control things.
Let's follow up on that vein of the plutocracy, oligarchy. Uh, you know, because the billionaire club here, these three gentlemen that you've mentioned and more, uh, the spotlight's on them, but thanks to Citizens United, the very vital Supreme Court case that allows all sorts of money to aid campaigns, and as long as it's going to a third party, can we say that to some degree, all the heavy lobbying and the dark money and the unbridled campaign dollars, can't we say it really started way back then, and it's just not happening right now?
Well, I think your reference to Citizens United is very important, and I remember being so concerned about that case even as it was handed down, and a lot of people I know were concerned about it because it meant a dramatic shift in the in the campaign structure, in the electoral process, and ultimately in the power. And so I think, it's been around at least since Citizens United. What was that, 15 or 20 years ago? And possibly earlier. I mean, we've had elements of it even in the 19th century. If you were rich, then the government would respect you. You had access. But in this case, we've gone beyond anything that happened before. It's open season. It's all these guys who are not only billionaires, but hundreds of $billion guys. And they are in public. They're not in the back room. They're being, shown all kinds of courtesies and access points. So my concern is it's unprecedented. Everything that Trump does is unprecedented. So yes, we have had strains of that before. Yes, money talks in this country more than anything. But these guys are going over the top.
Okay. Ben, to you, this isn't my main question, but it's kind of a follow-up from Jay's comments, and that is, are these billionaires and their huge influence of money and contributions, are they bending the knee, or are they going to be running the show?
That's a very complicated question to answer. I think it's more personally, I think it's more just that everybody in this little group kind of agrees on getting richer, like the kleptocracy kind of vision. So these billionaires are in it because they figure this is a way to make even more money. Trump is in it because this is a way for him to make lots of money. The people who he's putting in place are going along because they figure they're going to make, guess what? Lots of money. And they all really do not really care about governing, okay? They may say a lot of things, but I think that their only motivation is to make enormous amounts of money. And by the way,
well, wait, let me just add a point to what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And that is, how do you make money? Well, you have policies, government actions that favor the wealthy, that take the guardrails off. And so in terms of policy, they're going to be arguing for no regulation, right? They're going to be arguing for all kinds of changes that give them, clear paths to making more money. So yes, it's not all policy they care about. It's policy that affects them.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I mean, I would say that, well, let me give you an image. I went on last Wednesday to pay my respects to Jimmy Carter because he saved my godfather's life many years ago. And so out in the cold, I was standing there with my sister, with lots of other people, and it was around, say, 5:30 at night, okay? Trump pulls up, so everyone has to wait in the cold for 30 minutes while he goes in and pays his respects. Now, you would think that if somebody actually cared about people, they might pick a time other than when people are after work kind of thing, at some other time in the day. But no, we all had to stand there for 30 minutes. And trust me, we were not very happy while he went in and paid his respects because everything was stopped. That is the reality that we're going to be living in with these people. They do not care about any of us, and they just care about having the policies make money for them. And that's all I can see with them. And by the way, they don't care about law. I saw Hegseth. Hegseth is not even, you can't say that he wouldn't shoot demonstrators. Hegseth wouldn't say that he's going to abide by the Geneva Conventions. I mean, this is insane. But that's if Trump said shoot people, he would do it. Absolutely. Bondi is like, can't say whether she would prosecute Liz Cheney or Smith or something like that. I mean, you go up and down the line. I personally think that Rubio is kind of like a transitional figure. I mean, in other words, he looks like he's sort of in the club, but he'll be gone in 2 years, and there'll be some kind of extreme rightist after him, pushing the Trump agenda. So it's all really appalling, but that's what the American people chose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just add another element here. You know, here, what implications you see with institutions that are run, you know, currently by the Biden administration? I'm thinking of Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice. And specifically, I'm thinking of bending the knee when it pertains to the complete release of the January 6th report. They said that it was withheld because there was a couple of people still in trial for part of that. Do you buy that, Ben, or did Merrick Garland actually bend the knee or bend over?
I actually read that the volume 1 in the cover letter that Jack Smith wrote, and Jack Smith said in his cover letter that the volume 2 shouldn't be released because of the cases that are going on. So, you know, I don't think that's a question of bending the knee, given what he did.
I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, but I want to add something else that I thought was really interesting. If the cases with regards to those two guys are dismissed or dropped by the DOJ, the Bondi DOJ, the Trump DOJ, it's very likely there'd be a Freedom of Information Act request for volume 2, because that risk is no longer present. So it's an interesting little moment there that we'll see how that plays.
Okay. Thank you very much. Chuck, you know, earlier I mentioned the name of Lyndon B. Johnson, President Johnson, and he was no cream puff when it came to getting people to do his will. How would you compare what Donald Trump is doing, or maybe we don't know what he's doing, but there seems to be a lot of capitulation to Donald Trump and trying to please him, as those with Lyndon Johnson that fell into compliance. How do you compare those two presidents?
The first place I start is what they did, not necessarily how they did it. If they used forceful persuasion, bullying, intimidation, whatever you want to call it, to get people to support their position or get out of the way of it, you know, maybe there were elements of style that might be characterized in common. But it's not the tool you use, it's what you do with it. It's who you're hammering into the ground, right? And if you look at who Johnson negotiated with, MLK chief among them, and the people whose policies he stood up for in his last years, and his withdrawal from candidacy, triggered in many respects by his withdrawal from any desire to continue participation in the war that the Americans were waging in Vietnam. Look at what he does. So I think listening to Jay, listening to Ben, listening to you, I come back to the question, what can we learn from this to help us get through however extensive, severe, and protracted this period of abusive wealth and power leadership gets established and continues.
Is there anything on the horizon that you see as a learning moment already?
I don't think it's gelled yet, because one of the things that we're looking for is there anyone in any area that's going to stand up to Trump and the money boys and say, no, that's not going to happen here.
Okay. Let me go to
Is
the
there
money
somebody
boys.
going to draw the line?
Let me go to the money boys because I heard Jay's comments and Ben's, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on, are these billionaires, are they bending the knee right now temporarily, or they're bending the knee just long enough for them to start running the show? Which way will it be? In compliance, dutifully in compliance, Trump's lackeys with a lot of money, or do they start pushing him around, threatening money for this or that against Trump?
Well, a couple of things. And drawing again on the insights from Jay and Ben and from you, if you look at the various factors involved in the government funding disputes recently, okay, essentially, Musk got what he wanted. Trump did not, but he can get it later, and he probably will, which is the elimination of the debt ceiling or the raising of the debt ceiling to some extraordinary level. All of these guys are negotiators. Trump's a transactional guy. If we get distracted into focusing on the money and power aspects of the transactions here, then we get distracted away from saying, okay, what do they get for that? Whether it's tariffs, whether it's regulatory restrictions or elimination of them, whatever it may be.
Well, let me suggest one that
one last thing. We've seen Republicans come out and literally say, we are going to require blue states who suffered disasters, California principal among them, to accede to our policies and programs if they want to get disaster relief funding. I mean, what does that tell you? Is that really something that American people, voters,
well, first off,
but they're very upfront about it. They're saying it right out there.
What comes to mind is when Trump withheld defense money for Zelensky in Ukraine. And if you didn't do my quid pro quo, you're not getting the money. I mean, and Donald Trump was impeached for that very thing. So I'm surprised that House Speaker Johnson has said exactly this thing. And this is what I wanted to ask you. I mean, I've never seen anything more deplorable is that we're withholding disaster relief because probably it's related to the debt ceiling is my thought. They want to pry open the debt ceiling and they're going to use disaster relief funds for California's fires. Once again, it's a new. It's not a new normal. It's just a new thing that I've just never seen before. So, your thoughts about just how deplorable is that, Chuck?
I actually really don't even have a word for it.
There is no word. Yeah.
It should be unthinkable. It's certainly unconscionable.
Yeah.
And it should be intolerable to every American.
We sink lower to the basement and each step we go down into the basement, we don't realize it because it's just one step at a time. Okay, thank you, Chuck. Jay, Washington Post, LA Times, they and Joe Scarborough from Morning Joe on MSNBC, they all bent the knee, very overtly bent the knee. How many more media organizations do we see do this? Because what? They're scared about being on Trump's enemy list? Why is the media, which has a distinct responsibility to report the truth when they see it, why are they bending the knee? Or is it the owners of the media company that's bending the knee and they have to go along with the ride? Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's the latter. I think it's the owners. It's a capitalist society. Somebody owns them. Somebody manages them. Somebody can be threatened. And so I can imagine in my mind a blackboard, a chart in Trump's office or in his mind, if he doesn't want to write it down, listing all the media that has, spoken against him. And he's going to attack every single one of them, wherever and however he can do that. And we don't know exactly when. Sometimes his vengeance takes a long time to play out. And for example, the whole thing with Zelensky and the quid pro quo back years ago, he's still playing that out. He's mad at Zelensky for not doing what he asked, what he ordered. And with California, um, it's vengeance. California, the governor, Newsom, has spoken against him. This is his way of getting back. And he will do his vengeance, not immediately. If not immediately, then soon enough, in a completely immoral, unethical, intolerant kind of way. So my answer to you is that he's motivated by the worst sorts of human morality in the basement, and he's going to continue to do that. I'd like to go further, though. So an example, you were asking for an example, Tim. An example that I thought was very interesting is Jennifer Rubin. She was a lead columnist, and perhaps the most well-known columnist in the Washington Post. And she recently quit. She's now doing a thing on Substack. ThinkTech is on there too. And she said, I really couldn't stand it over there. And I reorganized myself on Substack with a podcast. And we're going to talk about democracy, which apparently she couldn't speak freely on at the Post. So you have her leaving. She's courageous. She's talented. She's not going to stick around to see Bezos doing those things. Now, I give you these examples because I think that is a way that the resistance, as weak as it is, I'm sorry it's weak, but that is a way the resistance can operate. You have to be courageous. Those Republican senators who show no vertebrae at all, they're weak. But someday, somehow, sometime, maybe this will turn. We can only hope it turns soon, because he's going to do outrageous things more and more. He's going to be encouraged by his own psychopathy, and he will do outrageous things. And maybe they will resist, like Jennifer Rubin. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, so we have Musk, we have Bezos, we have Zuckerberg, we have Pichai, Thiel, and maybe others too in the tech industry. This is not their natural thing. This is not something that they're all that comfortable with. We know that. And their people, their employees are not all that comfortable with it. And they're doing it, there was an article about this. How do they really feel? Well, they're not very comfortable with it. And they're kind of, as you suggested, Tim, they're waiting it out. And maybe it'll go away. Maybe they can get back to a more normal, a more normal life in the country. Of course, they still want to make a lot of money. But what strikes me, though, is that you have a group, they have a common denominator. They are all tech billionaires. Mm-hmm. Trump is not. He's not a tech billionaire. These guys could get together. One of them could say to the others one day, hey, I can't stand it here. We have got to get out of this. Our names, our legacies are going to be judged by what we do and what we hang around with. So let's do something. Let's try to stop him, at least on this issue or that issue. So I can foresee a time in the next 2 or 3 years where that happens. And so he thinks he's got them all corralled. He thinks he owns them all. And maybe they send signals to confirm that. But I think it's not necessarily a guarantee.
It's interesting. You said the billionaire club gets together and concerned about their legacies. I'm thinking of the Carnegie Libraries was really a result of Dale Carnegie's horrible reputation out there as a wealthy millionaire. And he did something about that. He did something nice for humanity and the community. We can only speculate whether or not the billionaire club follows suit, or they venture off into a different area to try to make a difference in this country. One never knows. But for now, as long as there's government contracts waiting to be dished out, I think they're at the hog trough looking for the biggest ears of corn. And I don't think that stops just yet.
People in general in this country, it's it's actually a flaw in this country. They respect wealth. They think, most people think, that if you got to the top in terms of wealth and economic power, capitalist power, you must be smart. You must know what you're doing. So when these guys get up there and sit at the inauguration and show fealty to Trump, they're actually sending a message to everyone in the country who buys into that. And they're saying, hey, we're smart, we're powerful, we're really rich. You'd like to be as rich as we are. And we buy into what Trump is saying. So you should buy into. There's not too much you can do to get around it. So if we're here, you should be here too. And of course, that's a false premise. But I think the secondary message is we're here, so you should be here. And this is really an awful kind of thing, because in a plutocracy, that's exactly the way it works. Everybody is all impressed with the wealthy people. They run the place, and everyone else is kind of a secondary class of citizen, a serf, the poor. And in this case, the poor is going to get more poor, and the poor is going to have a short lifespan because of all the things that Trump is doing. And I think that may make these, oligarchs, potential oligarchs, feel guilty, because they came, many of them, from modest circumstances.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jay. Before I go to you, Chuck, Ben, I hear Jay's comment about people that think people that have lots of money are right about things, or they've done something right. And I'm reminded of your quotation about very rich people. Can you share that with us once again?
Yes, it's a French proverb, which is that behind every great fortune is a great crime. Okay,
That's the one.
that's the one. And it's really an attitude towards these types of very rich people that in a way I think is quite healthy, because it gets away from that thing that Jay's talking about, which is that that Protestant work ethic thing of, like, if you're blessed to have a lot of money, you must be blessed by God. All that stuff that has been put into our system over these years. I just want to say that I don't think that any of these people are capable of feeling guilty. Okay, I'm sorry. Or feeling empathy or feeling sympathy. They're just predators. That's how they get to be that big. They're predatory type people, and they've been successful in the manner in which they've been there. When you talk about things like Andrew Carnegie building libraries, back in the day, John D. Rockefeller had Standard Oil at the time. He used to walk around town and give little kids 10-cent dimes, to try to show he was sort of a warm person, right? But what Standard Oil was trying to do is to completely control all of the railroads and basically control everybody until they got broken up. It's not that I have anything against these people. It's just that you watch their conduct, right?
Yep.
Their conduct is reduce the amount of cost they have to pay anybody, H-1B visas, etc., and make as much money and keep it for themselves. That's it.
Yep. There's only one billionaire that comes to mind and he was from the Seattle area, and we knew him well, Bill Gates. He was not well liked. He was a pretty wormy character. It wasn't until he met Melinda Gates that she was able to transform his shallow life into a fairly decent human being. Or maybe it was just a PR job. I don't know. But the bottom line is, yes, these billionaires are in many cases a little weak, a little shallow on the humanistic side of things. But that's just an opinion, and it's certainly not stated as a fact. Chuck, please put on your prognostic hat. And I hate to ask you these things, because it's just that you're predicting the future, and we really don't know what the future will hold for any of us. But put on that prognostic hat, and if you can guess what areas of government or the social arena do you expect norms to fall by the wayside as people capitulate to Donald Trump and policies are amended or weakened? That term's come up in the congressional hearings about reducing standards to fit these deplorable characters that are looking for these staff positions. So can you guess what areas may fall victim to Trumpism and the reduction of standards that these agencies or these social norms used to have?
I mean, we already have models for that, right? The Trump-dominated MAGA Supreme Court has already shown us where that's going to happen. If you look at core values such as diversity, equality, inclusion, fair treatment, to the extent that those need to be sacrificed in order to prevent the redistribution of wealth and assets so that those without get more, and if that has to come from sources that those with depend on, they don't want that to happen. You'll see it in housing, you'll see it as you have in the environment, you'll see it in disaster relief and preparedness, you will see it in education as we have. I mean, he's already announced the attack areas.
Mm-hmm.
We know what is at risk and what is at expense here. And that is the core rights of people to the opportunities, the relationships, and access to the resources, housing, education, healthcare, whatever, you name it, that our growth has depended on. How long will it take for that to impact enough people for there to be a counter movement, an opposition to that? Will depend, I think, largely on how much solidarity those who are opposed to these directions achieve within the next 2, 3, 4 years. So instead of different groups out there fighting issues on abortion, housing, education, healthcare, the more they come together, the more they unify, the more they start to protect the values that are at stake and at the core of all those issues, the more change becomes likely.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I was thinking, again, it disturbs me that there is the rhetoric or the threat that disaster relief would be withheld in order to compel certain politicians or thinking into more of the MAGA world. And I initially, a little while ago, said, Speaker Johnson of the House of Representatives suggested that there may be withholding of money. And I thought maybe it's about the debt ceiling. But then I remember some discussion about withholding things if Governor Newsom of California fights them on deportation and immigration issues. So this thing could take all sorts of different turns and directions. And you're right, Donald Trump has set out his game plan on those institutions in which he's going to attack and try to neutralize or eliminate. And so, but you never know, the future and where the multi-headed Hydra leads you to. And that's what we're dealing with Donald Trump and his new staff personnel. Where are his surrogates going to lead him to? So with that, I guess we'll go around the table and get last thoughts. Jay, to you first.
The word that comes to my mind is sacrifice. If you want to have a successful resistance, people have to be willing to sacrifice, because we know that it's not only Trump, but his acolytes are going to be looking to do vengeance, to limit free speech, to make it impossible for people to resist. That's the playbook in all of these dictatorships in history. And so if you're going to have a successful resistance, you have to sacrifice. In World War II, that often meant sacrificing your life or your family's life or your friend's life or, a number of people in your village and town, their lives. But the only way to really make the point is to sacrifice. Now, so Musk is worth $600 billion. If he turned his back on Trump, then he might only be worth $100 billion. I wouldn't mind having $100 billion. I want to go on record about that. If he loses part of his fortune because he loses some of these government contracts, which is probably what would happen, he'd still be a very wealthy man. So it's that's a greed question, isn't it? And Bezos, the same thing. I have suggested that Bezos divest himself of the post, but he's not going to do that because Trump wants him on the board, so to speak. He wants him to, to avoid direct attacks on Trump. Zuckerberg is, I think he's driven by greed. And so I'm not sure how he would react. But if he sacrificed, okay, so, he wouldn't be worth what he is today if he sacrificed. Pichai, Google is getting bigger all the time. I get mail from Google every 5 minutes. They got new plans, new products. They're taking over the world. And without guardrails, they're going to be huge. They are already, you all know, they're going to be huge and huger here and everywhere. If they sacrificed, if Pichai sacrificed, they wouldn't be so huge. But that would be better for them in the long run and better for us in the short term. Same with Peter Thiel. Same with all the tech billionaires. And so, I'm sad to say that they're not willing to sacrifice. They should be, but they're not. And that comes to my last point. My last point is those guys have one thing in common beyond their billionaire status. They have Trump in common. Trump holds them in line because he threatens to cancel or, reduce their government contracts. And there's no question that he can do that. He's done that before. And so you have a real problem there. If Trump were not there, I suggest to you that this billionaires roundtable would really fall apart. And so that goes for a lot of people in the MAGA crowd and in the Congress. If he wasn't there, he holds them together by fear, by threats, just as Anne Applebaum wrote about Russia's move to expand into Eastern Europe. And so I think we're living in a time where he's getting older, maybe weaker. He may not be able to hold the line on these threats. And if that's so, we're going to have a change. And maybe, just maybe, it won't be a plutocracy.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Ben, you're up.
While Jay was talking about sacrifice, it popped into my head to take a look back at Thomas Snyder's new book on tyranny. And it has a chapter 20, which is only one sentence, which says, if none of us is prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. Okay? And so that was really quite stunning as that's the entire chapter, that one line. And the idea of that being willing to go that far in terms of sacrifice is what may be needed of us to be able to push back against this. I do not believe that any of these people that we've talked about will sacrifice. I do believe that just like we're watching right now, they will watch which way the wind is blowing and move with the wind. That's all they do. That's all they're made of. And it's unfortunate, but you find very rare people at that level willing to go against the grain. I give one exception, Costco. Costco has said that it's going to maintain its DEI programs, notwithstanding all this noise you hear. That's an example of sort of leadership, so to speak, against the winds. But if I just would say that it's a difficult time, but we've had difficult times before, and there's always been some way, somehow, that people have been able to find a way to push for freedom. And some people have died for it, but there's always some way, somehow, and you have to just try to figure what it is. And I don't know what that answer is, but I know that everyone is looking for something to try to get us there.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Donald Trump honoring those sacrifices by calling them suckers and losers. Thank you, Ben. Chuck, you get the last word here.
I think all three of you have summed it up and really insightfully articulated what's at risk and at stake here. And the attack is literally on the values that bond us, that motivate us in our families, in our friendships, in our work, in our lives. And the people who stand up for those, because anyone who does comes under vicious, withering attack. That's going to be the question. Will there form alliances, constituencies, coalitions of people who really will stand up for the values across the board? Housing, healthcare, education, immigration, everywhere. Whether you're in California or in Kiev or wherever the next disaster or attack hits. Because now they've combined the disasters as a weapon with the attacks on the values that unite us. That's the challenge. And Ben and you and Dave and Jay have expressed it very well. Are we going to come together and stand up for what makes us valuable as human beings?
Great final word. I'd like to thank you, Chuck, my guest, Ben, my guest here on American Issues Take One. Mr. Fidell, thank you for being co-host and sponsoring this show. I think it's important stuff we do here. You may be lone voices out in the wilderness calling out, but nevertheless, we do so. Before I end, I'd like to just say that the inauguration of Donald Trump, the 47th president, will take place on January the 20th, coming right up. And I'm reminded of those in England that always saw the slogan during Second World War, keep calm, but carry on. I'm going to edit that slightly for these times here in the United States. Stay tuned and hang on. And with that, I'm Tim Apicella, your host for American Issues Take One. And won't you join us next week? And until then, aloha.